Welcome to today's webinar brought to you by OraSure Technologies. OraSure Technologies is a global leader in oral fluid substance abuse testing products. Their unique assays provide accurate and easy-to-administer testing methods to help determine the presence or absence of drugs or alcohol in a person's system. Oral fluid-based testing products provide a simplified collection process, faster results, cost savings with minimal risk of tampering, and dramatically reduced risk of adulteration. The Intercept Oral Fluid Drug Test is an FDA-cleared laboratory-based oral fluid drug testing system that enables accurate testing for drugs of abuse including marijuana, cocaine, PCP, amphetamines, and opiates. With a fast and easy-to-administer collection process, Intercept is ideal for workplace, criminal justice, drug treatment centers, the clinical setting screening programs, among others. Today's presentation is approved for 1 credit hour of continuing education from SAPAC for CSAPAs. Further information will be provided at the end of our presentation. Today's presentation is entitled Unlimited Alcohol Testing. It's possible and it's affordable, and will be presented by Bill Curran and Spencer Honeyman. Bill Curran is the president of WFC and Associates, a national consulting firm that specializes in drug testing policy development and providing accurate and up-to-date state drug testing law information. He is the editor of the online Ultimate Guide to State Drug Testing Laws at statedrugtestinglaws.com. He also publishes the e-newsletter State Drug Testing Laws Monthly. Mr. Curran is the former executive director of the American Council for Drug Education and served as vice president of consulting for National Third-Party Administrator of Drug Testing and Background Screening Services. He founded WFC and Associates in 1998. He's the author or co-author of 10 books on substance abuse issues, including Why Drug Testing. He also administers the annual Drug Testing Industry Survey, now in its 16th year. Spencer Honeyman is an account development manager at TrueTouch Technologies. TrueTouch Technologies is the maker of a new product, TrueTouch 2500, an alcohol deterrent solution. This product is a great fit for drug courts, probation, and parole departments, and for pretrial agencies, enabling staff to conduct more frequent alcohol testing that will serve as a deterrent for alcohol use by your clients. It is a non-invasive, self-administered testing method that delivers accurate results in as little as 15 seconds and simultaneously verifies users' identification. The TrueTouch 2500 sobriety assurance system uses safe near-infrared light that measure alcohol intoxication and provide biometric identification without breath or bodily fluids, disposables or consumables, or even the presence of a test administrator. It will now be our pleasure to hear from Bill Curran and Spencer Honeyman.
Well, Jessica, thank you very much, and welcome to everybody who's on today's webinar. First and foremost, of course, I'd like to thank OraSure Technologies for hosting this monthly series of webinars, and I'm looking forward to co-presenting again with Spencer Honeyman from TrueTouch Technologies. Spencer and I have presented before, and I think you're going to really find the information that Spencer has prepared for today's presentation. You're going to find it very interesting. Now, I think most of the people on the line today are in the criminal justice field or have some experience in criminal justice or providing screening services for criminal justice professionals. And so if you're in the criminal justice field, you know that despite the fact that marijuana is the substance that gets all the headlines, especially now with the movement toward legalizing marijuana, you know from your professional experience that alcohol is really the #1 drug of abuse in the United States. It is often at the heart of the problems that criminals have before and after they break the law, but we're not doing as much alcohol testing as we should be, or we're not doing it as smartly perhaps as we could be doing. And that's true in other areas of screening, such as in the workplace or in treatment facilities, etc. Alcohol testing sometimes gets a little bit of a short shrift compared to drug testing. It really requires a balanced approach that includes the more and most advanced technologies for both drug and alcohol testing. Over the years, the alcohol testing method that has perhaps become most popular and most commonly used is breath. Breathalyzers are most often used, especially in workplace settings and perhaps also in criminal justice settings. But there are new technologies that make it possible to test more often and to do it in a very cost-effective way when it comes to alcohol, as well as drugs. We're talking about, at the very beginning, Jessica talked a little bit about the OraSure Intercept device. It's not a commercial for that, but about 20 years ago, I did a survey of the drug testing industry. It was about 16 years ago now that I think about it. And one of the questions was, in the future, how will people be doing drug and alcohol testing? And I came to the conclusion that in the future, and it wouldn't even take 20 or 30 years to get there, we wouldn't be doing drug testing or alcohol testing the way that we're doing it today. Now, this was back in 1999, just before the turn of the century, and that's what everybody in the drug and alcohol testing industry was concerned about is, what's the future look like? And I came to that conclusion based on interviewing people in the industry. And so today, about 16 years later, we see that, a lot of companies in the workplace market are moving away from the traditional lab-based urine drug testing and going to more advanced forms of drug testing like oral fluid testing, lab-based oral fluid testing, and hair testing. And the same, I think we're at sort of the same crossroads when it comes to alcohol testing. And we're going to talk about that in detail, and Spencer's going to cover a lot of that in his part of the presentation. But to sort of set the stage for that, let's review some statistics that are available from the federal government. These come out every year. It's called the National Survey on Drug Use and Health. It's been in effect since the 1970s. It used to be called the National Household Survey on Drug Use. And it gives us a very good idea of the trends of drug abuse from year to year. And so you can go back into the 70s if you want to and compare the trends from year to year. You can see as the 70s developed that the rate of cocaine abuse started to spike, and then in the 80s, crack cocaine, etc. And now we're finding that over the last few years, the rate of substance abuse among Americans has begun to spike again. Nearly 24 million Americans 12 and older admit, as part of this survey sponsored by the federal government, that they have used an illicit drug at least one time in the 30 days just prior to being surveyed. And of course, if you think about it, if you're contacted on the phone by somebody who identifies themselves as a surveyor for the federal government and you want to start asking them questions about their illegal drug use behavior, they might not be that honest with the surveyor. And so what we have found from studies that have been done on this survey is that the results are perhaps as much as a third lower than what they really should be. So that 24 million, that 23.9 million that you see at the top of the screen is perhaps maybe closer to 30 or 32 million. That's about, right now, at least based on that, that's over 9% of the population in the United States over the age of 12. It went down back in the early 2000s, but it's crept up again, and the rate is actually higher than in years from 2002 to 2008. And marijuana, no surprise, has been right at the heart of this increase in drug abuse in the United States. It is the most commonly abused drug. 18.9 million users admit to using marijuana, and it was used by 79% of current illicit drug users. 2/3 of illicit drug users only used marijuana. Now, of course, we're just talking about illicit drug use, okay? Here's a chart that kind of puts it out in front of you. This is very interesting because you see at the top the 23.9 million, and then below it the 18.9 million for marijuana. I know this is of great pertinence in the criminal justice field. The number 2 category of drug abuse, not cocaine, not heroin, but the psychotherapeutic category of drugs. That's the tranquilizers and the sedatives, etc. Those are the prescription drugs that people are abusing, 6.8 million. So that's the number 2 category. So you go back into the history of the National Survey on Drug Use and Health back in the days when it was the National Household Survey, and you see for many, many years it was always marijuana number 1, cocaine number 2, and maybe heroin or amphetamines or something like that in that number 3, number 4 category. But over the last several years, we've seen the rise of psychotherapeutic drug abuse, the misuse of prescription substances, the oxycodones and the hydrocodones and the expanded family of opiates. And so that's a category to keep an eye on, because when we talk about helping an individual overcome their substance abuse problems and using drug testing as one of the ways of getting there, you got to make sure that you're testing for the drugs that people are actually using. And the same is true when it comes to alcohol, because alcohol is by far the number one substance that is abused by Americans. Slightly more than half of all Americans 12 and older reported as part of the survey that they were current drinkers of alcohol. That means that they had at least one drink in the 30 days prior to being surveyed. No big deal, right? One drink. Look at that second bullet. Nearly one quarter of those individuals admitted to being binge drinkers in the last 30 days prior to the survey. That's nearly 60 million people who admit to having at least 5 drinks on at least one occasion in the 30 days prior to being surveyed. And the third bullet's even more disturbing. These are the heavy drinkers. 17 million people admitted that they had at least 5 drinks on at least 5 occasions in the 30 days just prior to being surveyed. So you can look at the simple category of current drinkers, but then when you compare it to the binge drinkers and to the heavy drinkers, you see that while the number goes down, of course, from 52 million to 22 to 17, it's still a big number. And a lot of those people are, in the workforce and sitting across the table from somebody who's in the criminal justice field. The rate of current alcohol use, and I think you're going to find this interesting, bear with me as I go through a couple of slides here related to employment. 64.3% for full-time employed adults were current alcohol users. And then go to the second bullet again. Most binge and heavy alcohol users were employed in 2011. Among the 56.5 million, 42 million were employed either full or part-time, and 15.5 million of heavy drinkers were employed as well. Now, the rate of alcohol abuse among unemployed individuals actually went down between 2010 and 2011, and that's a significant drop when you consider the universe of the number, the millions that are involved in that. But the rate of individuals who are binge drinkers and heavy drinkers who are employed is about 75% in both categories. That's a significant number. Now, look at it on an occupation-by-occupation basis. Roofers, electricians, carpenters, tile installers, finishers, floor workers, construction laborers, and then that miscellaneous category of other construction-related workers. And then just below that, people in the food and beverage serving occupations. Retail, just below that. Salespeople, and then you get into some other kind of construction-related occupations, and then finally cooks. And I only bring this up because I'm not trying to stereotype anybody who's been involved in crimes and has gone through the system and is trying to straighten out their lives, but I think you know that oftentimes people go through the system, they're looking for a job. It's hard to find a job after you've been in jail or in prison, and lots of times the type of employment they can find is going to be in the construction industry. It's going to be in the food services industry. And they're going to be surrounded by people who are heavy alcohol users. And I'm not saying this, again, in any kind of stereotypical way. I have to admit to you, I personally have never been incarcerated. I've never been on parole or on probation, and I'm grateful for that. But unfortunately, I have relatives, perhaps just like many of the people on today's webinar, who have gotten caught up in the law. They've done something that has caused them to run afoul of the law, and they've gone through the system. They've either been incarcerated for a period of time or maybe a short period of time, and they've come out. They either come out on probation or they go through the parole system, etc. And I know from the experience of dealing with these relatives that they have a tough time finding a job. And almost in every instance, at least in my family of those individuals, they've had some extensive experience with alcohol abuse and also with drug abuse. And so they come out, they're looking for a job, and frankly, I can tell you, at least from my experience, these are the kind of jobs that they can get. And so this is important to you if you're in the criminal justice field, because you're trying to help these individuals change their lives. Drug and alcohol testing is one of the tools that you use, and you're trying to help them find jobs, or you're at least monitoring their search for jobs. And these are the type of jobs that they can typically get. And substance abuse is higher in these fields than it is in other fields. Of course, as I said at the very beginning, alcohol abuse and alcohol misuse is often involved before individuals become incarcerated, as they are contemplating, the crimes that they end up committing. 5.3 million adults, that's about 36% of those under correctional supervision at the time, were drinking at the time of their conviction offense. Okay, according to the U.S. Department of Justice, They estimate that a majority of criminal offenders were under the influence of alcohol alone when they committed their crimes. In other words, not marijuana, not any other drug, just alcohol. And federal research shows that about 40% of convicted murderers being held in either jail or state prison, for them alcohol use was a factor during the actual committing of the homicide. Alcohol is a factor in 40% of all violent crimes that are committed in the United States. And if you go down to the 4 bullets below there, based on victim reports, okay, these are the victims sort of describing the state of the offender that assaulted them. They estimate that alcohol use was a factor in 37% of rapes and sexual assaults, 15% of robberies, and I'll point out here, and I think I might have a slide on it, among robberies that did not include an assault on another person. Usually drug abuse is a higher factor than alcohol abuse, but even in this category, 15% of robberies involved alcohol, 27% of aggravated assaults, and 25% of simple assaults. Among violent crimes, the offender is far more likely to have been drinking than under the influence of other drugs, as I mentioned, and then with the exception of robberies. Okay, so I think that you know, if you're in the criminal justice field, you know these statistics. You may not know the actual numbers. You may know the numbers that apply in the area where you actually work and live and make a living. They may be different than these. They may be higher. They may be a little bit lower. But clearly the point is that alcohol abuse is involved in a lot of these crimes. Nearly 500,000 incidents between intimates. Okay, these are people who know each other, a current or former spouse, a boyfriend, a girlfriend, etc., will involve somebody who is under the influence of alcohol at the time of the crime. 1.4 million incidents of alcohol-related violence are committed against strangers. So as bad as the problem is among people we know, it's even higher among strangers involving alcohol-related violence towards strangers. And individuals under the age of 21, and I had a slide at one time, I took it out, that showed the rate of substance abuse among young people, 12 and 13, 14 and 15, 16 and 17. I took it out, but you might find it interesting to know that individuals under the age of 21 were victims in just over 13% of incidents of alcohol-related violence, and the offenders in nearly 9%. 70% of alcohol-related incidents of violence occur in the home around 11 p.m. And then very importantly, 20% of these incidents involve the use of a weapon other than hands, fists, or feet. Again, these are things that you know if you're in the criminal justice field. Nonetheless, as a reminder of the importance of including some type of an alcohol testing system in what you do with your clients. We know that driving while intoxicated is a big problem in our country, that alcohol is and always has been for many years the main factor. You might find it interesting to know, however, that over the last 10 years, as it relates to this, the rate of THC-related traffic fatalities, those are people who are under the influence of marijuana in a traffic fatality, has tripled. That rate has tripled in the last 10 years. It coincides, not coincidentally, I don't believe, with the movement towards legalizing marijuana for medical use. So that prominently came into focus in our country about 10, 12 years ago, and has now become a contributing factor, if nothing else, to the rate of increase in THC-related traffic fatalities, just now starting to catch up, however, with the rate of alcohol-related crashes. You can see the dollar amount significant, over $100 billion, but really it's the cost of life and the damage that is done to the survivors, the victims, and others who are caught up in the web of people who are actually getting behind the wheel of a car and committing a crime by driving while under the influence, while being intoxicated with alcohol. All of this very important. Again, more stats: 40% of state prisoners convicted of violent crimes were under the influence of alcohol at the time of their offense. Again, a little bit more of everything. You're going to actually receive a link to the recording of today's webinar so that you can actually go back, listen to this recording, but also go through the slides. And so if there are any statistics here that you would like to record, you'll be able to do that when you go through and listen to it again. All of the sources are at the bottom of each page. So if you want to find where the statistic came from, in this case, on this particular slide, it was a Pew study from the National Partnership on Alcohol Misuse and Crime, and then we also provided the link to the website where you can find the information. Now, with a lot of those statistics in mind, it's been my experience over the years that alcohol testing is a powerful weapon in the fight against substance abuse. In any area of life, whether we're talking about conducting alcohol tests on prom night in a high school, all the way to the workplace, all the way to the various elements of the criminal justice field. It is a powerful way to deter alcohol use, and even more so to help identify people who need help. It is a very addictive substance, and there are people who just are not going to be able to stop using alcohol and misusing it, abusing it, until they get help. And there are many different ways to conduct alcohol testing. Okay, over the years, as I mentioned at the beginning, breath has always been the #1 method for alcohol testing, at least in the workplace market. It's often available through patient service centers, occupational health centers. Breathalyzer devices and machines can be placed on a desk, typically in a police station or in a hospital, etc. And the cost is somewhat reasonable. Okay, what we find is that these machines are sometimes hard to find. They're not always available at the time when you need them or within a budget that you have. And because of the cost, which is reasonable, it really is somewhat prohibitive to do it on a regular daily basis. Now, if you were going to do blood testing, which is sort of the gold standard from a scientific standpoint, you would find the cost to be much, much higher and, an invasive process, obviously. Saliva or oral fluid alcohol testing, less invasive, easy to administer, still a cost involved. Urine testing is probably the least reliable. It's the least stable method of alcohol testing. It's an option, but it's not a very commonly used alcohol testing method. Of the 4 that have traditionally been the choices available to people in the criminal justice field, breath is probably the #1 alcohol testing method, saliva close behind, under some circumstances, blood and urine. But there are options. Remember, I said back in 1999, I did that survey, and I became convinced that in the future, we wouldn't be doing drug and alcohol testing the way we were doing it in 1999. It just stood to reason that we would advance in technology and science and the availability of new testing methods that would make it easier for us to do these types of screenings, and perhaps in a more cost-effective way. And that's sort of setting the table a little bit for Spencer. Let me just say, before I turn the microphone over to Spencer, because he and I have presented before, what Spencer's going to talk about is a completely different type of alcohol testing method. It doesn't involve breath, and it doesn't involve saliva. And so try to think of, and Spencer will do this for you, but try to think of, as he describes this technology, think of it in the setting in which you work and whether or not it would be feasible. From past presentations that we've done together, it usually is a real eye-opener for our audience. And so with that, I'm going to turn the microphone over to Spencer, and then as he concludes his part, then we'll go through a Q&A segment of our presentation. And we would invite you to use the Q&A function on your screen and submit your questions so that we can answer the specific issues that come up during his part of the presentation. So Spencer, I'm going to pass the ball over to you.
Bill, appreciate the introduction. My name is Spencer Honeyman. I'm the Account Development Manager at TrueTouch Technologies. I first of all want to thank Jessica, Bill, and WFC and Associates for hosting the webinar today. I'd also like to give a big thank you to OraSure Technologies for bringing us together. Lastly, I'd like to thank all of you for spending some time with me this afternoon. The goal of today's presentation is to share our new technology with you and how it can impact your criminal justice department. What we're commercializing at TrueTouch is what we like to call the TrueTouch solution. You can see an image of our product, the GT2500, in the slide in front of you. And what we're commercializing is a tool that will allow the criminal justice departments to screen for alcohol on a more frequent basis, thus creating an alcohol deterrent solution. And whether it be for treatment or punishment, the ability to frequently screen for alcohol is going to have the most impact on your clients. our device is able to non-invasively, using an optically based sensor, screen for alcohol while simultaneously verifying user identity. And we do this using light through the skin. You can see in the image on the right, we actually test the finger, or what we call the knuckle on the finger. And the reason we do use the knuckle and not the finger pad is we're measuring the reflection of light. A lot of individuals have callous fingertips, so we don't get as good of a reflection from the fingertip as we do the knuckle. And there tends not to be much hair or injury on that part of the finger. Now, the way the device works is when an individual first comes up to the device, they're going to identify themselves using a user ID. This ID could be a social security number, a birth date, or a randomly generated number. In a 60-second scan, when that individual puts their knuckle on the sensor, we're going to get a biometric template for that individual. And that's the reflection of the light from the skin, collagen, fat, and water layers, which is different enough between me and you and someone else to be an identifier. And so the purpose of creating that biometric template is it allows the testing to be completely self-administered. For example, if you entered my user ID and tried to test as me, the machine would read biometric failure. Every time after that initial enrollment, which is the biometric, in 15 seconds the device is going to do two things. The first thing it's going to do is it's going to confirm you are who you say you are, so it'll confirm that biometric. And the second thing it will do is confirm if you're above or below the alcohol threshold set on the device. Our standard setting is 0.04. We can have it as low as 0.02. If you are who you say you are and you're below the threshold, the screen will display pass. If you are not who you say you are, it'll say biometric failure. And if you're above the alcohol threshold, the machine will measure and quantify the amount of alcohol in the blood. And in fact, it's able to do it very, very accurately. So it will display a numeric reading such as 0.04, 0.08, 0.12, whatever that individual is. Now, TrueTouch is implemented as an impairment detection tool. So this is a non-DOT screening tool. And we recommend any results that are a positive alcohol test are confirmed with a third-party confirmation. So that's either an evidentiary breathalyzer test or another lab test, which is something most of your facilities probably have on site now. So I want to take a quick step back. I just gave you a lot of information on our core product, and we're going to get back to that in just a minute. But just to give you a little bit more information on TrueTouch as a whole. So we're commercializing that product, the TT2500. It's been in the market for just a little bit less than a year. OraSure Technologies is one of our master distribution partners. And simultaneous to that TT2500 product, we received an award from NHTSA, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, the DOT, and the ACT Consortium, which is made up of the top 20 automotive manufacturers. And they gave us a 5-year, $10 million mission to develop a sensor to put behind the start button in vehicles. So if you imagine the new cars, they have a start button that you press to start it. Our sensor will be located behind that start button. And if you are not below the legal limit, the car will not start. So if you're at above 0.08, the car will not start. And so what we've done is partner with a Japanese safety manufacturer called Takata. They're a $1 billion company, and we've already licensed it to those top 20 companies in the ACT Consortium. And so the ACT Consortium was developed for safety-sensitive products, such as seatbelts and airbags. Those are two things that the companies don't want any competition or anyone to gain an unfair advantage in the market. And so we've licensed that technology, and that's something we are moving forward with. And we had our first prototype installed in Q1. So that's very exciting news for us, and that's sort of what we're doing simultaneous to our core product, which is the TT2500. And that's something you'll begin seeing available in cars in probably 3 to 4 years. So here's what we call our final product concept. You can see where the start button would be. You press it, and that's what you'll start seeing in cars. So just to give you an idea of where TrueTouch is heading, this is our core product right now, and this is what we'll have in the market for the next 3 to 4 years. But down the road, you're going to see a next-generation sensor. So you may think to yourself, well, how are they possibly verifying user identity and measuring blood alcohol by putting a finger on a sensor? very fair question. So I'm going to give you guys some basic information today on the biometric and the technology. If you have questions or would require more information regarding those, we have tons of materials, white papers, etc., so feel free to reach out. Our biometric, the way it works is when you put the finger on the sensor, in those 60 seconds, as I said, we're measuring the reflection of light. And that reflection looks different based on the skin, collagen, fat, and water layers. And it's a unique identifier. And so what happens when you have that biometric enrollment is the result is one of the spheres you see in the graph on the right. And that's what the enrollment looks like. And every subsequent scan after that, if the biometric does not fall somewhere in that sphere, then what you're going to have, then that person will biometrically fail and they'll not be able to test. What's unique about our biometric is that it'll change with someone. So every time you take a test, we take a rolling average of your enrollment scan and that current test. So if you gain weight or lose weight over time, the machine will track with you, and thus you won't fail as yourself. And so this is a technology that we've licensed from a sister company called Lumidyne. And Lumidyne makes this for the workplace. And we are the only company that has licensed this technology in conjunction with alcohol testing. So those are the basics on how our biometric works. An individual must test at least once every 6 weeks to make sure they don't change enough where they could fail it themselves. The concept of the way we test for alcohol is relatively simple. So when the light shines into the finger, what we're actually doing is interrogating the blood molecules. When the light goes into those blood molecules, it causes them to vibrate. So since we're measuring the blood, which is the gold standard in alcohol, we're able to do this very accurately. And when the light causes them to vibrate, the intensity and frequency of those vibrations, this is what it would look like if you were sober. So you see these peaks and valleys. This is what's called the near-infrared spectrum. When you have alcohol in your system, the peaks and valleys in this spectrum are raised proportionately with the amount of alcohol in your system. So for example, if you're at 0.04, they would be slightly raised. If you're at 0.08, it would be raised double that amount. So it's proportionate to the amount of alcohol in your system. And this is a similar technology to a pulse oximeter, which you'd see in your friendly doctor's office, which measures oxidation. It's just a little bit more sophisticated. And so that's the basics on how we use this. This is not a completely new way to measure bodily function, but what we're able to do is do this in conjunction with biometrics for alcohol screen. So in terms of clinical validation, our product has had over 1.5 million tests in real-world environment. We have several criminal justice installations currently, and we have several pending. And so we have those results, and we also just did a study in 2012 under an IRB in Santa Fe, New Mexico, where we had 102 subjects. We had 10 TrueTouch devices, 5 evidentiary breathalyzers, and 3 phlebotomists drawing blood. So what we did was every 15 minutes, we tested on breath and blood, and at other times, all the subjects were continuously testing on the TrueTouch device. And you can see the results on the graphs in front of you. So TrueTouch had a 92% correlation to venous blood, which is the gold standard in alcohol testing. While breath compared to blood ranged between 80 and 90%, depending on what breathalyzer was being used. Anywhere above 0.02% BAC, TrueTouch is more accurate than a breathalyzer. So we have several information packets and white papers on this, so if interested, happy to get into more detail. So some key takeaways on our technology. It's safe and non-invasive. So this is harmless light similar to a flashlight being shined into your finger. As I just discussed, over 1.5 million tests performed in the field between our clinical trials and our real-world data. We have 8 peer-reviewed scientific studies, which are all available as well. Our core technology has actually been developed over the past 15 years, and it has had over $50 million in research. Our 2 founders were originally conducting a study on behalf of Johnson & Johnson, which is a $40 million product, to create a non-invasive tool for glucose measurement for diabetics. And the mandate from Johnson & Johnson was they wanted something equally as accurate as a blood prick. Now, while our founders and other companies have come up with tools that are very accurate. No one has found something as accurate as a blood prick yet. But what they were able to do was measure for alcohol very accurately. And so what we've gone ahead and done is patented this technology in conjunction with biometrics, and we have over 50 issued patents, both in the United States and internationally. Going back to the clinical trials, we have a 0.92 or 92% correlation to venous blood, which is better than a breathalyzer, anywhere above 0.02. So this is very, very accurate technology. And what makes this truly unique is that all testing can be self-administered due to the built-in biometric identity authentication. So you get the best of both worlds. Not only is this a very accurate tool, but it's non-invasive, self-administered, and allows you to test on a frequent or daily enough basis to create that real deterrent solution, and allows you to have that actual impairment detection, which will modify individuals' behavior. And that's the goal here. We want someone who should not be consuming alcohol to think twice about doing that, because they know they could actually be tested frequently enough, and that'll affect their decision making. So going into the value proposition a little bit further, this is going to allow facilities for the first time to screen for alcohol on a daily or frequent basis. So whether you're in a drug court and you're testing individuals as they come into the court, whether you're a probation office testing people on a daily basis, a work release program testing people as they go in or out of the facility, a drug treatment program or DWI program, this is applicable to all the different departments. And in the past, the other testing options that Bill discussed earlier, breath, blood, urine, were either too expensive, too cumbersome and invasive, such as blood, or they weren't self-administered and would take the time of your staff and other employees to do this testing, and it was not feasible to do on a frequent basis. The TT2500 finally provides a true alcohol deterrent solution that is going to modify individual behavior and also have higher impairment detection. And so the goal here is, whether your focus is on treatment or punishment, the goal is to really modify individual behavior, which will make them better off throughout the entire criminal justice process. And so what are the results of that? You're going to see a greater deterrence. This is a preventative treatment. So in the case that someone knows that they're going to have to come in first thing in the morning and take a test, they'll be less likely to consume alcohol that evening or morning or throughout the day. It'll allow you to identify problems more quickly. So if you have an individual who you're only testing once every 30 days, they may be consuming alcohol on a more frequent basis that you're not aware of, and this will identify the problem much more quickly and allow you to react to it. You'll see quicker recovery times and hopefully less frequent violators, because you'll be able to identify problems more quickly and get the necessary help. So that's the basics on our product. I'm going to go in a little bit to how this is usually implemented in the technology. So our device, what's unique about it is you can think about it like a computer. So all results, whether it be a biometric enrollment or a test, are sent over the network to what we call a TT report dashboard. And I'm going to get into some screenshots and information on that later. But anytime there is a test, it is sent over the network directly to the dashboard, which will show a user ID, a picture of that person, the test time and date, the result, etc. And you'll have that right on your dashboard. What's also unique about our device is that once you enroll on one device, your biometric is stored in the network. And so once you enroll on one machine, you can test on all other machines and not need to re-enroll. So if you have a county where you have a drug court, probation, and work release, and someone may be involved in more than one of those, they can enroll on one and test on the other. And that's a nice feature. In addition, we also have what's called an RFID card reader. So what you can do, instead of having people punch in their number using the touchscreen or a keypad, you can give them a card that they can just put in front of the machine, and it will automatically read that user ID, which just makes things very simple. Lastly, while all results are sent to the dashboard, you can also have a mobile alert by email or text message sent to your phone, and that will notify you of any biometric failure or any alcohol positive, so you can react immediately and put whatever protocol in place that is necessary. So in terms of the implementation spectrum, we talked about the more complex, which is an integration with the network, etc., and that comes with the rental package we offer. We also have a simpler package, which is we connect a thermal printer to the machine, and the result is printed out right next to the machine, and that could be their ticket to hand to some officer or whoever is managing the system. So not only is it stored on the device, it can also be stored on that piece of paper. Now, another thing that's important to note is what is the result that is showed on the screen does not necessarily need to be the result that is showed in TT Report. So, for example, if you want, for privacy concerns, you don't want other people seeing results who may be waiting to use the device, what we can have set up is in 15 seconds, they're going to take their test, and then the machine can just say, "Thank you for taking the test." And after that, all results will be sent over the network to the dashboard or a mobile alert, and so thus it doesn't need to be shown on the screen. So we can customize this for your facility for privacy concerns or anything else you may be interested in. So in terms of concept of operations, the places where we have seen the most traction so far are drug courts, probation offices, parole, work release programs, drug treatment centers, and DWI programs. And what's nice is several counties have bought a few units which they can sometimes rotate between departments. Let's say probation uses it daily, but one day the drug court needs it. Sometimes they're able to appropriate funds together to be able to purchase or rent one of these devices. You don't need to test 100% daily. So you could test 10, 20, 30, 50% of people in a program completely randomly to create that deterrence factor. And so we have probation programs which test 10% of people daily. So everyone in the program needs to call in the morning, and 10% get selected. They come in and take their alcohol screen. And so that still has the behavior modification across all 700 individuals in the program. Work release facilities usually test before people leave and after, and you can do a combination of all of the above, as I said. So you can work with other departments in your county or other facilities near you to be able to procure TrueTouches, multiple devices, and make it sort of a county-wide solution. So one of our reference customers in Scranton, Pennsylvania is Lackawanna County. This is their probation office. And so they came to us. They've had it for several years now. They had our beta model as well. And they were doing very frequent alcohol screening for their probation program. So they were doing upwards of 100 tests per day. And so from the time spent from their staff conducting these tests and the cost of mouthpieces, which, by the way, TrueTouch has no consumables or disposables, they were not getting the deterrence they wanted, so they weren't able to test as frequently as they wanted. And in addition, it was costing them too much time and too much money. So the solution they've come up with is they're using a 0.02 threshold, so anyone over 0.02 will be a positive. And they're having all 700 people in the program call in every single day. Using this automated phone system, 10% of people get randomly selected. So you could get selected on Monday and Tuesday, or you may not get selected till Friday. And they're doing, on average, about 100 tests per day, so it's a little over 10%. And those individuals come in and take a test. Now, since they call in every morning, you don't know when you're going to be selected, thus you have that true deterrent. And their response has been, it has had such an impact on individuals because they don't know when they're going to be tested, that it's really benefited them in the long run. Lackawanna, and it's not in this slide, is also using it in their work release program. So they were having issues with individuals going into the real world and consuming alcohol and coming back into the correctional facility. And that caused problems with other inmates, guards, etc. And so this was a tool that allowed them to completely eliminate alcohol from their facility. And so the goal is you start to see behavior modification. So initially you may see some positive results, and over time when people know they are going to be tested or could be tested, this allows you to have a completely non-invasive way of tracking that and creating that true deterrent solution through behavior modification. Now I'd like to discuss TT Report a little bit. So this is the software piece that comes with the TrueTouch device. And knowing how many different materials and tests and files you guys have to keep up with on a daily basis, it's nice to have this in all one place. So this software will provide a dashboard. This is the home screen where you see all devices in your organization. So these are our demo units. There's about 10 devices. You can see if they're connected or not. And then it also shows total measurements, total number of passes, total number of fails, and the percentage who pass. The next screen you have is going to be users. So this is me, Spencer Honeyman, with my image. And here's my user ID, 998877. And it's going to show the tests for the most recent time period, or you can go back as far as you'd like. And so if an individual has an issue, you can see when they've had it, how many times they've had it, what time of day, what day of the week, what are their triggers, how can we best help that individual. And so you can see for me, thankfully, they're mostly passes, and there's one biometric fail during a demo. And so you can see what device they tested on, what time, what the result was, etc. The last screen, we like to make it as simple as possible, is measurements. So if you're at your desk and you want to look at all the measurements that were taken that day, you can just sit there, look at all the user IDs, the person's name, the status, and the date and time they took the test. Or if you just want to see if anyone failed, you could search above, below, by date, etc. And you can run analytical reports from this information. And so you could determine how big of an alcohol problem people in this department or facility have, and how to best correct that problem. And what we want to do is give you metrics to truly create a real analysis and have up-to-the-minute state of alcohol in your organization. And so what the mobile alerts allow you to do is, if there ever is a positive, it allows you to confirm that test and respond as quickly as possible. And so between the dashboard and the mobile alerts, you have, at all times, will have a very good understanding of what's going on in your facility. Now, just to sum up things today, you can definitely reach out to OraSure Technologies for more information on the product if interested, and TrueTouch is obviously happy to answer any questions. I know Bill's going to allow you to ask a few in a moment. But to be able to do this, we'd work with you, and OraSure would work with you on a use model. So what is your goal here? What's the objective? What percentage do we need to test to meet that objective? Do you need the dashboard, the networking? Would you prefer a printer or both? What's the appropriate threshold for your facility environment? We also have a system called walk-up testing, and it's important that I note that. So if you have a facility where you're going to have people who are not testing on a frequent basis, at least once every 6 weeks, we have the ability to enter 0 for user ID and to do a pure alcohol screen. So there's no biometric, no enrollment. It's a 25-second scan instead of 15 because we don't have the baseline, and it's a pure alcohol screen. So if you have people coming into a court or a probation office that is just going to be a one-time test and you don't want to enroll them, you can do a walk-up test. So, or it can be a combination of the biometric and walk-up. And that's something, once we got into the deployment details, we would make very simple for you. And so the goal here is to put together a proposal for you that works best for your facility and creates that real alcohol deterrent solution as well as behavior modification. So again, I thank you for your time this afternoon, and I'm going to turn the presentation back over to Bill for any questions you guys may have.
Okay, thank you, Spencer. I have a couple of questions for you. We've got several from our audience as well, but before I get to those, you know, one of the advantages that you talked about was the fact that with the TrueTouch 2500, it's self-administered. The individual sits there in front of the device, but what type of supervision is required? You know, what additional manpower is needed to do it?
So that's going to depend on how you implement the product. So if you have the device fully networked, meaning all the results are sent to a dashboard, you're going to want to put it in a place where individuals are entering the facility or a place that's easy to test. And once they take that test, they can either be minimally supervised, meaning there's someone nearby that makes sure they don't pull the machine off the wall or off the table and run out of the room with it. But all testing can be done completely, or it can be done completely unsupervised, meaning all results are sent to the dashboard, and if there's any positives, you respond to that individual as you see necessary.
Okay, and then also I made note, you talked about the biometric process, but is there some way for somebody to sort of game the system and for somebody else to take the test for them? Is there some way to cheat on it by substituting somebody else's knuckle for yours?
So, great question. One thing I should clarify is sometimes people try and use the excuse that they have a broken finger or, God forbid, they lose a finger. You can test with any of the middle 3 fingers on either hand. So generally that's not going to be a problem, something we like to note, and that will come up if you have some troublemakers. So the biometric system is very, very accurate and robust. So this is not something the FBI is going to be using. This is something many workplaces are using, and it's something that you can think of like a laptop-grade fingerprint reader. So it's very, very accurate. About 1 in 2,000 people, or 0.05%, could test as one another. But again, they're not going to know who that person is, and they'd have to get very, very, very lucky to find that person on the first try. So it's something you you're not going to see in a real world environment. We haven't seen it in the workplace or in the criminal justice. We've never seen someone be able to buddy punch.
What about somebody who sort of, is a common user of these hand sanitizers that are alcohol-based? Is that going to throw the system off using, because you're actually putting that substance on your hand? Is it going to interfere with the accuracy of the reading?
So the way we interact with hand sanitizers is obviously many of them have a large quantity of alcohol in them. A good rule of thumb is if the hand sanitizer is still wet or if your hand is still lubricated, you will pop a positive. So if it's within 30 to 60 seconds of testing, you could pop a positive. It's going to be very high, so something like a 0.47 where you wouldn't be standing or probably not breathing at that point. So you can pop a positive if you have just put it on. Within 30 to 60 seconds, once it dries, it will not impact the screening at all. So all we recommend is you don't have a bottle of hand sanitizer sitting next to the TrueTouch device.
Okay. Fair enough. And then one other question before I get to the audience. Is there any kind of, interaction with any kinds of specific drugs or, over-the-counter medications that have alcohol in them?
No. So we've done extensive clinical trials with several drugs. There is no impact on the alcohol reading. So as I said earlier, what we're actually measuring are the blood molecules. And using the light through the skin or near-infrared spectroscopy, we're able to isolate alcohol in the blood. And that's purely what we measure for. So other prescription drugs or any over-the-counter medication is not going to be an issue.
Okay, and then from a technology standpoint, obviously that makes it very different than other testing methods.
Yes.
We had a number of questions that were submitted, and this one's kind of an interesting one, Spencer. What about the window of detection with your device? Is it similar to other traditional testing methods? For example, how soon after somebody consumes alcohol will the TrueTouch 2500 be able to detect that alcohol in their system, and for how long?
Sure. So as I said earlier, we're measuring current alcohol detection. So this is not you drank the night before. This is what is the current level of blood alcohol content. So similar to a breathalyzer, it probably lags about 10 minutes behind breath because obviously alcohol is on your breath more quickly than it is in your blood. And so it needs the machine needs your blood needs probably 20 minutes on average to start to absorb alcohol. So if you chug a bottle of whiskey and put your finger on the sensor, you're going to pass a TrueTouch. After about 15 or 20 minutes, you'll pop a positive. The other thing that's important to note is the individuals using the machine, whether it's at 0.02 threshold or 0.04, they don't know what the threshold is. And so they're going to assume they can't drink any alcohol. They're not going to know the window of detection. So it's similar to a breathalyzer. It probably lags 10 or 15 minutes behind, again, because it's what's in the blood, and it'll stay in your system about 10 to 15 minutes longer than a breathalyzer because, again, it's going to be in your blood longer than it's in your breath.
Okay, perfect. And I may as well get to this question now because it's the most prevalent question we have on here, asked by many, many different people. So I'll ask it. People are interested. What's the cost of it? I mean, and it's been worded in different ways, but basically that's what a lot of people on today's webinar are asking. What does the system cost? What does it cost to actually test as much as you want to test?
Sure. So what we offer is a rental program, and usually we sign either a 36 or a 48-month rental. And the rental program comes out, for a 36-month rental, it comes out to about $40 per day or $1,280 per month. And that includes the device, that includes a 36-month software and hardware warranty, so it covers the device and the software. And that also includes the TT report, mobile alerts, networking, etc. So everything is included in that package, as well as light sources. So once every 9 to 12 months, you need to change the light source in the device. And it's as simple as changing a light bulb. And so that's included, and so there are no other consumables. So like with a breathalyzer, you're paying for mouthpieces, etc. There are no consumables. You're not paying for the time of that individual or spending the time and investment in that individual doing all the tests. and it comes in one monthly rental package. We also do offer a purchase. That's dependent on volume. And so the one other thing I'll touch on with that is through OraSure Technology, we do offer pricing specials through the end of next month. So if you have interest and you want to discuss that with us, we're happy to discuss further. So it can be slightly based on volume, number of units, etc. So we're happy to discuss the pricing and cost further because understand that's important.
So in other words, everything that's really needed to be able to use the TrueTouch 2500 is included in the pricing. There are no extra things to buy to account for 100 tests a day one day and 200 tests the next day.
Right. So you can do unlimited testing. I mean, in the workplace, we have companies doing upwards of 1,000 tests per day, and we have some doing as little as 10. And so whether it's 100% of individuals in your facility or it's 10% on a daily basis or it's everyone who comes into a drug court, the goal is to create that behavior modification for those individuals and have that impairment detection as quickly as possible to be able to help that individual.
Okay. And we're about to close, but actually one other question that was submitted that I think is important to get to, which is, how about calibration? A lot of people who are used to using breathalyzers, for example, or perhaps other methods, deal with the calibration of the machine on a regular basis. So what's involved with that with the TrueTouch 2500?
So great question. That's one of the huge advantages of TrueTouch. Our device is self-calibrating, so you never need to send it back to a factory or anything like that. As you could see in one of the images of the TrueTouch, there's actually a lid above the sensor that closes in between each test. And every eighth of a second when that lid is closed, a beam of light is sent. And there's a material behind the lid called polystyrene. And we know what the reflection of light and the wavelengths look like from the reflection of the polystyrene. And if it's not exactly on, the machine will have a notification and will not allow you to test. And so if it needs to recalibrate, it'll recalibrate. If there's a health issue, you'll see it on the machine and you'll be able to contact your customer support, and you'll not be able to test. So the machine is continuously self-calibrating, and that's how we're able to get continuously accurate alcohol and biometric results.
Perfect. And I'm trying to squeeze in as many questions. I know we're almost out of time. Well, just one more real quick one. And any questions that you submit that we're not able to get to, we'll take care of them. Either Spencer or I will provide information for you to try to answer your questions. But what about setting the cutoff level? I know you talked about 0.02, 0.04. How much flexibility does the user have with that?
So that's something that'll come preset that we're able to work with you on. So before you order it, we'll ask you what threshold you'd like the device set at, and that's something we'll work with you on. So there is a correlation between scan time and threshold. At 0.02, you're looking at a higher scan time, probably closer to 20 seconds, than you are with 0.04. And that's because the device needs to be 99.9% confident that individual is below the threshold. And so you can sort of think of it like a toggle. The lower that level is, the more time it's going to take for the machine to be sure. And so in the workplace, we have levels as high as 0.08 if they're just concerned about somebody drinking. 0.04 is our standard setting, so impairment detection or fit for duty level. And for programs that are concerned about really low levels of alcohol, we put the threshold at 0.02. And so all devices like breathalyzers, any other sort of rapid detection device, they all have a threshold. And with TrueTouch, we like to make that very clear with you, and we'll be able to give you a numeric reading anywhere above that threshold. Okay,
and then let me squeeze one more in. We're seconds from being out of time, but does the TrueTouch 2500, can it detect drugs, or do you anticipate that? This is another question that's a common question here.
So we get that a lot. This current device, the TT2500, just detects alcohol. This technology is applicable for drugs as well. Unfortunately, to do the clinical trials are going to be very, very expensive. So per drug, there is only about 2 places in the world you can dose people with cocaine and heroin to the levels that we would need to be very accurate. And it costs a little over $1 million per drug. So to do a panel, we'd be talking about $15 million just in the trials, et cetera. So if you think of TrueTouch as a long-term business investment, for the next 3 to 4 years, we're going to be focused on this product, commercializing it in both the criminal justice and workplace department. At that point, you'll see the next generation automotive interlock, and then we will be then down the road we will be pursuing a combination of drugs and alcohol, and that's probably 10 years from now.
Okay.
And so we hope that's the future of drug and alcohol testing that we'll be able to share with all of you.
Well, the questions keep coming in, but unfortunately we have to end. Thank you, Spencer, for that excellent information. Thank you to the audience for joining us and for OraSure Technologies and hosting and sponsoring today's webinar. And with that, I'll turn the microphone back over to Jessica.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Spencer. And on behalf of OraSure Technologies, we hope that you have found today's presentation informative and helpful. This presentation was recorded, and you will receive instructions informing you how to access the recording. Today's presentation is approved for 1 credit hour of continuing education from SAPAC for CSAPAs. Please email Jessica Polt at jessica@billcurrent.com if you are interested in receiving that credit. Again, that's Jessica Polt at Jessica, Jessica, at billcurrent, BILLCURRENT.com if you are interested in receiving that credit. Thank you for your attendance today. This concludes today's webinar.